Welcome back to another episode of Speaking on Demand. As you know, I love speaking with some of our keynote speakers, but at times also definitely enjoy connecting with some meeting professionals and meeting executives. And that's what we've got on the video line today. I'm happy to be here today with Wade Kaler. He is the executive director at FCSI, the Americas division. Wade, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Aaron. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh man, it's good to connect with you. Wade and I have been able to work together on a couple of events, and one of the things that we had not talked about prior to today is the fact that we are both sitting in Illinois right now, and we're both flashing Green Bay Packers stuff behind us. Usually, I get into big trouble and hot water whenever I'm talking with clients that are not Packer fans, but we're in good hands today, aren't we?
Yeah, you've got the right person today. That's for sure.
So Wade, tell us a little bit about what you all have going on. I mean, I know you've worked for a while now, not just with FCSI. I mean, with Forte, you've got a lot of you're super busy. Tell us everything that you're doing right now, and then kind of like your role as you plan events and meetings and that sort of thing in our space.
Sure. I started Forte Association Management Company. It actually started as 520 Consulting, would be 25 years ago. No, 15 years ago. And I'm trying to add more years onto my life already again. So I started up as consulting, doing event planning and sponsorship sales and a little bit of PR. And then I became full service in 2010 for association management. And since 2010, I've brought on a couple more clients besides FCSI, the Americas. I've got the Collaborative Divorce Institute, which used to be CLII, which was the Collaborative Law Institute of Illinois. And I also manage the Illinois Council of Convention and Visitor Bureaus. So that's all the convention and visitor bureaus throughout the state of Illinois. And as far as my company goes, in my role in all of this, obviously I run the company and I'm responsible for day-to-day operations of Forte. In addition to that, I've got great employees. We are all virtual, have been for the last 6 years. And they work on the couple of the clients for me. And then I actually personally work on FCSI, the Americas, as their executive director. And I've been their executive director since 2010 when I took over the division. And, for me, I love event planning and meeting planning. It's definitely one of the most fun things we get to do. I've been doing that since 1996. And even before that, I didn't know I'd make a career out of it, but I used to plan our formals at our fraternity house. I planned my own wedding. I didn't realize I was going to make a career out of it back then, but lo and behold, sure enough, it's there. And so, the day-to-day operations of running an association are interesting. They're exciting. They change year to year, month to month, but the event planning is something that I really look forward to because it's one of those that you get to see it come from fruition all the way to conclusion, and you get to be a part of everything throughout. And I love creating, as a planner, there's nothing better than watching the reactions of the attendees. My event planning personality or philosophy really is I want to create those experiences. Education is very important, obviously, at any conference, but in a way, education is 50%, and I think the other 50% is the experience you can give them, whether it's a food experience, whether it's a nighttime party type experience or whatever. Because every conference that I go to and every one of them that I plan, I get as much out of those events and the networking from those as I do all the education. So for me, there's nothing like seeing those experiences at firsthand and being behind the scenes and watching something that you and your team have dreamt up and put a lot of work into it over the year or 2 years it's taken to get there, and then watch everybody really enjoy what you've put together. So that's very rewarding. And I'd say on average, 25 to 30% of my time is event planning, and the rest of it is managing the company and managing FCSI.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, when I think back on the two companies that I worked for like Fortune 500 companies, which would be Target and then Cintas Corporation. If you were to ask me about my memories at both places, I've got a ton of memories at both, but the first things that I'm drawn to are all about experiences and like with people. Okay. So at Target, going up to Minneapolis, going to the national meeting with 15,000 other people in there and getting to see Luke Bryan perform and whoever else they brought in that year, always a party. And then at Cintas, just amazing sales trainings, meetings with colleagues, fun dinners afterwards. So, I mean, I think back on those two experiences, and you hit it on the head. So, I mean, it sounds like you're definitely grew up as a natural event planner. So it's cool. That's kind of that's what you do. It's a big part of your day job.
It is, and I'm fortunate that my clients are most of my clients on the association sides, and all three of them are small businesses for the most part. A lot of my members aren't huge corporations, so those small businesses, they've got their little pods of people they work with and their coworkers and such. So they really thrive when it gets to a conference where they can network with like-minded individuals, because they don't really have that necessarily individually at home. So I think that's something I love about all three of the clients that we've got, is even though they've got, there's a couple big companies within those, but for the most part, that's their friends. That's their identity. That's what they come for. And so for you, if they've already got those relationships with people when they show up to your event, for me, it's okay. So what can I give them event wise that's going to blow their mind, they're going to remember when they go home, in addition to what they learned at an education breakout session? I want to give them that thing like, do you remember when we did that silent disco in Denver and people didn't even know what it was before we walked into that room? So that type of atmosphere where people really get excited about.
You definitely, I mean, as you know, most of what I do evolves around keynote speakers and presentations and trainers and that sort of thing. But from time to time, we dabble in the entertainment side of it as well. And when you told me about the silent disco, you do come up with some really unique ideas to make it an extra special experience. So
I'm a lifelong really cool learner as well, Aaron. Like I think my wife and I are both that way. She's got her PhD in curriculum and instruction design from U of I. And I only have a bachelor's, but I just constantly read magazines and blogs, and I love going out to like Biz Bash magazine and some others out there that show me what other people are doing. So I wouldn't say that anything I do is that original, other than the fact that I constantly look for those new things that are coming out and try to give that experience to people. The silent disco, especially for the group that we did it with, FCSI, I would say 85% of the people had no clue what a silent disco was when they walked in the room. And we really thought it would be different entertainment wise. They would come in, they would experience it, they would leave, and it would be just constantly a revolving door all night for the 2 hours that we had it going. But people came in and then never left. So they were having so much fun. And it's still one of those things that people still talk about. People that decided they didn't know what it was, so they didn't come and they went out to dinner instead, have like the whole FOMO, fear of missing out thing. I'm constantly getting calls from people like, when are you going to do it again? And it's probably one of those things that I don't ever really repeat things, but it's probably one of those that I'm going to have to repeat at some point just for natural demand. So that's and that's what makes you feel good though.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah, the people want more silent disco. So so one of the big questions, so we partner with corporations, but we also partner with a lot of state and national associations when we're booking speakers and to help with their event planning. So like the biggest question and concern that I'm hearing right now from meeting executives are, number one, how do I keep my members engaged from a virtual platform now that we can't meet, or we will be able to meet, but now that we haven't been able to meet? And how do I make sure that I don't lose membership? Have there been any strategies that you've employed over the last year, or any wins that you can talk about to kind of combat some of every meeting planner's fear?
Well, from a meeting planning perspective, what we did, we weren't doing a lot online. We were doing quarterly webinars. And in some instances, we weren't doing anything online. We were doing all face-to-face for some clients. So to use FCSI as the example, we were doing quarterly webinars. And when it all started, people just didn't know where to go, what to do, who to talk to. So we just kind of opened up on a weekly happy hour chat. And we didn't put any format to it. We had a few questions in our back pocket to get the conversation started, but we just really wanted to have people an opportunity to talk. And some people were scared. Some people were nervous. Some people were just confused. And so it gave them an outlet to have that conversations with. And that turned into a weekly thing of, FCSI only has 400 consultants and about 700 corporate members, corporate member being a corporation. And we were running anywhere from 60 to 100 people every week on these calls. And it was, I think, therapeutic for a lot of people as well, just because they had a chance to talk it out.
Yeah.
Well, then we decided, so we kept doing those. And then we kept, as the conversations were becoming a little repetitive, we decided, okay, now let's start adding in some education to it. So rather than take that happy hour though, and force it to be changed from somebody that's expecting a happy hour to be open, we decided to create a whole new series of webinars called Biz Essentials. And it was mainly about the business side of food service consulting. So identifying speakers and topics that the consulting community would like to know on the business side of things. So writing a professional email, or updating your LinkedIn profile, or using video now as marketing, and some of the other ones we've come up with. Alternative revenue sources is one we're doing today. So it's looking at those, and we brought those in, and there was an hour-long webinar where it was a traditional, more webinar type situation. In addition to that, what I also realized is a lot of people, even though we're a smaller association, what I found is a lot of people didn't know each other that well. So during a happy hour, people would be talking, and I'd be getting these private chats from members that I know well going, hey, who is this that's talking? I've never seen them at an event or talked to them. And so what I realized is people didn't know each other very well. And if they did know each other, a lot of them just knew each other by name and face maybe. So what we also did at that point is decided, let's dig in more content then, and let's develop a whole video podcast series ourselves, and decided to go big on that too. So I arranged to build a studio and flew down to Charlotte with a production company that we use. And the guys down there did an amazing job making, I get to make people's dreams come true as an event planner. They made what my vision was look amazing. And so I went down and filmed 26 episodes in 2 days, and we're releasing that every week now. And all those conversations is a friendly 15 to 20 minute conversation with the consultant about who they are, what do they do, what are their specialties, but then also some fun, dumb questions like would you rather, or speed rounds of fun items that I came up with. And it was just to show the human side of the consultant as well.
Yeah.
But also a chance for each other, or for them to get to know each other by watching these videos. And that's been received incredibly well. We branded it. It's called FCSI on Tap. And literally it's one of the best programs that we've done in a long time that can continue. And we're getting ready to film season 2, probably later in April for the rest of this year. So the board's already greenlit the rest of this year. So we'll put 52 episodes in the books this year. And I've got some ideas of taking that topic and then expanding it a little bit further now too. So out of a COVID conversation, essentially develops 2 new programs that we're continuing with on a monthly basis and on a weekly basis. So it's more content than we've ever done. And I don't know if those would have come about if we didn't get shut down, quite honestly.
No, and
I don't know that.
No, yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a great insight, and that you picked up on that. I think if all of us were to step back, do we really know our teammates, our members, our employees, even some of our distant family members? Do we really know each other as well as we think? I think about going to a conference, and it's kind of human nature to, if you're not a super outgoing networker, work in the room, you find your comfort zone and you're kind of like hanging out with that group. So if you're running an association right now, I encourage you to go check out Wade's podcast. It is legit. His studio looks amazing. What a great idea to like boost engagement. And Wade, I just saw this article come out, and it talked about how internal podcasts can boost engagement by like 300%. I have no idea how they scored that or whatever, but can you just speak to like some of the feedback that you've gotten in terms of engagement and learning about each other that came out of that?
Well, it serves two purposes, obviously. One, it serves the internal marketing piece of getting to know each other. A lot of these consultants, in addition, also work together at times. So if they don't, they're small business owners. So if they get to a project, let's say they're designing a hospital and they know a little bit, but not enough, they might bring in another consultant to help them with that project because they're a small business. So it's giving them that opportunity to network with each other that way. But also it's giving the consultant an opportunity to put their content out free of charge now. So We're letting them essentially market themselves and who they are to the world, and we're doing it on their behalf, letting the association pay for it, which to me is one of those things we should be doing as well. How can we help the member be more engaged with the communities? In addition to that, member benefit then becomes something they don't want to give up, which goes back to the thing you talked about in the beginning, which is how do you keep more members? Well, now you keep more members by giving them as much as you can, that benefits them. And what are they looking for as well? And that's something we had to ask ourselves. And that's why the Business Essentials webinars are really about the business side of things. That's what they wanted. The consultants told us that's the area that they needed help in. They realized that doing all of these meetings that they used to do, or these proposals in person, and now they're doing them on Zoom or Teams or whatever they're using, they weren't completely prepared for that potentially, at least some of them. And then also, what about a phone system? If they were in an office and now all of a sudden they're all working from home, where did they come from that? Just having Zoom and how to use that. And, so there's a lot of learning curves for not just obviously my members, for the world, but the business side is what we wanted. And then they wanted more marketing. So we gave them that as well. And engagement wise, from an internal perspective, I mean, people seem to love it. I hear a lot of positive things. I've had people reaching out now that weren't involved in season one, and we randomly chose the members. There was only 2 members that we actually personally chose, and that was the chair and the chair-elect of the division. We knew we wanted to get their message out as leaders, but then also, so the rest of them, the 24 others, were completely chosen at random from our membership list. And that's how season 2 is going to come about. That way there's no favorites. There's no, anything we have to worry about. So people are loving it. I've got people contacting me going, hey, I'd love to do season 2 if you're going to do one. So that makes my job easier. They want to be on it now. And, we're averaging 100 to 150 views for that first week that it's coming out. But we're seeing that it's still momentum going throughout. So the very first episode we put out in January, I think, is up to 450. So it's continuing to get views, even though we're not promoting it as much anymore.
Right.
And it's also, like I said before, it's giving that consultant firm the opportunity for them to post it out for their group and for their followers and for their customers. So say, hey, here's me, here's who I am. And that's what we want them to do, is use it as much as you can. And then we also started doing programmatic advertising, and that just recently started in the last week. So we wanted to have a few episodes in our bank before we actually started promoting it to the general public. So now that we've got enough episodes, we feel comfortable with it. So I think we'll see engagement go up even more now.
It's never, I mean, what you did, created a studio, ripped off 24 episodes or however many 26, however many it was. Yeah. That's a lot of work. I will say, like, oh yeah. So like my strategy is, when I first launched this one, Speaking on Demand, I launched this back in July, and it's not too late to get into podcasting. I always joke around with my wife about, I launched this thing 1 week before Michelle Obama launched her podcast. So I beat Michelle Obama to the punch.
There you go.
Viewership's a little bit different, but anyways, no, it's a great platform. And there are some tools out there. You know, you don't necessarily need a studio. You don't necessarily need to batch 2 days at a time.
No.
You know, I dedicate about 2 hours per week to the podcast, and, you know, I just kind of work other stuff around it. And it's a fun project. And like I was telling you online or offline beforehand, it really does it keeps you sharp, and it keeps you learning.
Yeah.
So
when I got to talk to consultants and members that I didn't know. So, you know, that some members that we interviewed, I've never met. They've never been to an event. Or maybe they were, and maybe it's because they just, you know, they're one of the members that just joined and they're happy to be a part of an association that they really don't get involved with. Others were newer, but it gave me an opportunity to get to know them individually. And I hope that draws more engagement out of them down the road. Now, now, I don't know that I could have done as well as we've done with the Biz Essentials, though, if it wasn't for the virtual speakers that are available now too. You know, I have one of a speaker that I looked at last year that we were potentially going to use for a future conference. And so when all this started, we reached back out to them and said, hey, you know, are you doing anything virtually? And luckily enough, they were. Now, and it was cheaper for me to do it. Oh, and we did a 3-part series with them. And it was cheaper for me to do that than the 1 hour of in-person keynote speak.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a huge offer for my members. And I don't think that's going to continue probably, especially for a lot of your speakers. Once they get back on the road, they're not going to have as many opportunities to do the virtuals that they were able to do now. But if speakers still give you that option of virtual versus in person, I still think that that's going to be around for a long time. I know as a meeting planner myself, I'm not looking to stop doing virtual keynotes or virtual paid professional speakers.
Yeah.
As long as I can still afford them is what it comes down to.
I think that there's room for both to coexist. A lot in person, and you get something from that, and then you get value for sure. You get convenience, and then the thing that I love, I think the most about virtual is that you just get so much better access. So I've very rarely been turned down when presenting a virtual offer to a speaker. I mean, there have been times where it just doesn't work out or whatever, but I was talking to a speaker last week that presented 5 times in one day. I kid you not.
Wow.
Like, that's a hell of a payday right there. 5 times in one day, and did a great job for every single client. Now, as a speakers bureau agent, that would make me a little bit nervous. Like, I'm not trying to like push 5 into one day. You know, if a speaker can do 1 in a day, great. Or maybe 1 in the morning and 1 afternoon and stay laser focused. It takes somebody with a lot of talent to be able to rip off like 5 of them in one day. So
yes, it does.
Yeah.
As somebody that did 13 episodes in 2 days of the podcast, I can tell you by going back and watching them now as we edit them, I can tell the difference myself in my energy levels. By looking at it without knowing exactly what time I filmed it, I can tell you whether it was afternoon or morning. And I can tell you pretty much how late in the afternoon it might have been too. You could, as much as you try to put on a happy face and give that energy level. It was tough at 7 o'clock at night when I've been going since 8 o'clock in the morning to have that same energy level for that 45 minutes. I think I was close, but I can definitely tell a difference. And I know at the end of day 2, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was mentally and physically exhausted.
My voice.
And I told the
my voice.
I
normally speak pretty clear, but my voice at the end of that much talking is shot. We used to have this saying, like when I worked at Target, I interviewed a lot of people there, and we would interview new executives coming on board, or we'd be interviewing for promotions, and all of the leaders, we'd always say to each other at the last interview, we'd always say, okay, guys, same energy at the last one as we had for the first one, just kind of as a reminder. But it's really hard to keep that level up every single time. So
absolutely, as much as you want to, it's difficult. So 5 times in a day, kudos to them if they did it, because that sounds exhausting.
I don't think that I think that every speaker hopes that they could be that busy and make a good payday and not have to travel. That was probably just a really rare situation. I mean, it was a great speaker where it happened to. But I've got one meeting that I'm planning right now where I'm trying to trying to get some scheduling worked out because this speaker has another event that they want to try to do in the afternoon, and I'm working on a late morning, so they need enough time to focus in between. So, the availability is still great. The value is still great. I think that there will be a really good opportunity to have a keynote speaker come to an event, like they come to an FCSI event, and then for like a little bit of money, there's like a follow-up or something like that, an accountability check or another presentation 90 days later. I think that there's going to be an opportunity to continue the process and the learning.
I completely agree because it's one of those areas where when you hire a keynote, at least with my group, that keynote's not coming back anytime soon. Even if they're fantastic, if they blow my audience away, they're not going to get hired back again soon. Just because we only do a conference once a year.
Yeah.
So and there's obviously more topics and more themes that come about. So I love the idea of a follow-up for people that have attended or maybe people that didn't attend. And again, I don't know where we're going to go with the hybrid models moving forward or how much we're going to do online versus live. I mean, I think that probably this year, this fall, and probably next year, we'll see a lot of hybrid models going on. But I think that's also going to depend on the audience. Some groups don't want it. Some groups are going to want it, and some groups are going to demand it. So I think that's going to depend on what your client looks like, what the association looks like. I think that'll happen. But after 2022, I just don't know how much we'll see hybrid models moving forward. I'm nervous about too much of a hybrid model because I think you miss out on a lot of stuff when you're not able to network with those people. I attended ASAE last year. I attended AMCI last year. And while I got good education out of it, I just felt empty because I didn't get a chance to meet anyone new really well, didn't have any deep conversations or get to know anyone in a good way as far as like potential mentor mentee type things or maybe business partnerships or whatever it might be. You miss out on those nighttime activities and those nighttime and evening afternoon conversations with people that you never knew existed before.
Is it safe to say that your members and people that you're hearing from, is there a pretty good appetite to get back together and meet in person?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, all my members are that way. It doesn't hurt that 2 out of the 3 are completely in the hospitality industry.
No kidding.
So they are thriving. The Convention and Visitor Bureau group, we actually had a meeting last fall face-to-face and did a hybrid model. But we actually did get together in the Quad Cities and we did I think we did a pretty good job of putting it together. I've got an employee that works for me, Kristen, that just rock and rolled through that whole thing and did an amazing job for me. And had great help with the CVB that was hosting it as well. So it was a good test model for us as a company to see how it was going to work. I will say that it gets expensive. It's a lot more AV wise, a lot more expensive to do a hybrid model than it is traditional AV. So that we've got to take that into consideration moving forward. But I do think, and then the CVB people are, can't wait to get back together again. The consultants and the food service industry as a whole can't wait to get back together again. Unfortunately, it's still early in this. The National Restaurant Show that was scheduled to take place in May, which is an area we usually do a big event at, and everything has already been canceled in person and moved to online. Doesn't surprise me. It's in the state of Illinois. And as you know, Aaron, both of us living in the state of Illinois is still in a pretty good lockdown situation. So I think that August is our next big event that we've got planned, and I feel pretty good about it. The month of March, as I stated to you before, is I think pretty important with the vaccines, and see what we look like at the end of March as to how much more comfortable I'm going to feel about it. But I feel very confident that August and beyond, I think we're going to be in a good situation to be able to meet together face to face and feel very comfortable to do it. And my next big event for FCSI after this is Montreal, Canada next year. And I can't even go up there right now without quarantining for 14 days. Yep. So that planning has been a new learning experience for me as well, because I'm having to plan an event without being on site and not being able to walk venues and such. And so I'm really hoping that by September, August, September, I can get up there and look at venues that we're looking at in person, because it's hard as an event planner to get a feel for space without looking at space in person.
I can't even imagine. It's a fantastic destination. I hope everything comes together and internationally we can kind of, make that trip.
Yeah. I think we will.
Cool place.
I think, if you read a lot of the things I'm reading, whether you agree with it or not agree with it, it doesn't really matter at this point. It's going to be a matter of, I think we're going to have vaccine passports if you're going to travel anywhere outside of your own home country, whether it's in Europe or Asia or Canada or Latin America, wherever it is. I think we're going to have vaccine passports moving forward. And that's been something that's been talked about before this pandemic. So, to have it happen now I think it was inevitable going to happen. This just speeds up the process.
Yeah, I've heard that too. The vaccine passports. Yeah. What else did I want to ask you specifically around the hospitality piece? So with you guys being obviously, that being so close to in the heart of your industry, like now we're 1 year after we got the news about COVID and everything started shutting down. Like have you had any like big reflection moments or anything or any major obstacles that you guys have overcome? I'm just kind of more curious to hear about your journey. You don't have to, you can just kind of give the Cliff Notes version, but with all kinds of restaurants, hotels, shutting down, going out of business, closing for months. I thought about you a lot of times last year. Do you have any reflection moments now, a year later?
Well, it was a sad year for a lot of people. I know a lot of clients had their clients, people lost their businesses, they've lost their homes, restaurants that were mom and pop owned really struggled at times, especially with a complete shutdown. There isn't the giant government bailouts that some big corporations get for a lot of the small businesses. So right. They struggled a lot. A lot of them are still struggling. In Illinois, we're here, 25% capacity down here in downstate. So that's not a lot when it comes to, trying to keep your doors open. And I don't think a lot of people have any idea what it takes money wise to just fire up the kitchen and get it open, in addition to the employees that have to be there to offer that full menu. And I think that's a lot of struggles.
And then I always think about it from a business standpoint. So you've got those expenses, and then how in the heck do you plan for payroll and staffing? Like, how do you staff to, because the customer comes in, they're still going to have pretty high expectations. We've got like this steakhouse in town, and now, you go in and you kind of know what you're going to get. It's the menu's been reduced down, and that the fries are probably going to be soggy. But the expectations are still pretty high. So how in the heck do you staff to an unpredictable demand? It's got to be challenging.
It is. And I can only speak from, what I hear, and then also my own personal experiences. And as you do, Aaron, in Champaign, I live in Bloomington, Illinois, right up the road. We both live in college towns, and those colleges don't have a lot of people in town right now. So staffing is very difficult in Bloomington, Illinois right now, because they don't have a lot of the college kids. And those that are here aren't willing to take the risk to work in a restaurant because they can't afford to get sick and miss their school. So it's a catch-22 there. So the expectations of service have changed, and I think they need to for a lot of customers. Like, you're just going to have to be happy they're open, is what I look at it.
Yep.
Be a little more flexible. You don't have to lower your standards completely, but be a little more flexible with the amount of time it takes. Just enjoy the fact that you're able to go out and have a meal in a restaurant. If it takes an extra 15 minutes, so be it. Relax.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Have some compassion and have some patience. I've seen it where, upset customers and that sort of thing. Yeah. And it's like, I think you're right. We do really need to reset our expectations, but hey, what a good opportunity if a restaurant or a business can figure it out, and supersede those and exceed those expectations. I think that, you're just going to have another leg up, and it's, Even though it's
Yep.
more challenging, there's more opportunities out there. There's always more
Well, and
opportunities.
also look at the opportunities that came out of something bad. How many restaurants did you know that were locally owned that didn't offer any to-go menu before
Oh my
this
gosh. Or
happened?
delivery. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and didn't, and now they've got dedicated lines where they're leaving them up to get to go because they realize that they don't want to give up their all of their to go business. So instead of maybe having 6 drive up lines, they've got 3, but that's still a dedicated space. And a lot of people still found out, including myself, that it was kind of nice to have a restaurant go pick it up and come right back, and or have it delivered quickly, and to be able to sit around and have a nicer meal. It's not fast food, it's a nicer meal around the dinner table if you didn't feel like cooking that night. The other opportunities that kind of came out of this in larger cities were, in some large cities, the rents and everything had become really, really expensive. So what we've noticed in some large cities are restaurants going out of business, and then they'll wait their little turn before they can open back up, but able to renegotiate either with the current landlord or a new landlord for maybe a little bit smaller of a space, or maybe not, but much cheaper because everybody's hurting in the commercial space as well. So there is some opportunities that come out of a negative situation as well. You know, it's those that are looking at those perspectives to how do we, okay, so it's terrible now, how can we build to where we can reopen down the road, even if it's a year from now? How can we
Right.
come back and reopen and be stronger and be better? And so we're seeing some of those, you know, but not everybody's out of the woods yet. You know, the what we call in the food service industry the BNI, which is business and industry, it's like the corporate cafeterias for, you know, a State Farm or an
Sure.
Adobe or, you know, Apple or whoever it might be. You know, they don't have anybody working there right now. So all
Yeah.
of those corporate caterers that are shut down, and then when they try to reopen, as they start to bring people back into their corporate headquarters, how many are going to be there? How much food service do they really need? What are we going to deliver to desks, and how are we going to do that? Or,
Yep.
you know, so there's a lot of questions still unanswered. But I can tell you from a food service consultant standpoint, they haven't seen business drop at all the entire COVID break. Um, the requests for proposals that are coming through are still incredibly strong. Um, they're still designing a lot of commercial kitchens in various venues. So the restaurant industry, it's hurting right now, but it'll come back strong, and it'll look different,
Sure.
but you know, that's evolution, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah. Well, I could talk to you for a long time about meeting planning, about food, restaurants, all that type of stuff. Man, Wade, I really appreciate just picking your brain today and your perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love your perspective on the meetings and events industry. Before I let you go, is there any advice that you have for other meeting executives out there, or anything that you want to leave us with today?
You know, it goes back to being self-reflective over the last year, and what I said about restaurants is, you know, look back and reflect the fact that you've still got a job. Look at the positive fact that we are able to transform an industry from a lot of us doing face-to-face to virtuals that our our members or our customers loved, and they still look forward to. The fact that we are able to adjust to all of that and still move forward is something I look at. And then also, you know, I was traveling probably twice a month before the pandemic hit. And, you know, I've been home now. I haven't really traveled much at all since March of last year. So it's been a year since I did a major travel. And, you know, being able to be home with my kids, with my wife, working on the house a little bit, and, you know, a little bit of that reflectiveness made me just appreciate what I really do have. You know, sometimes, you know, Ferris Bueller says sometimes life moves by too fast. You got to slow down and take a look around. Well, that's kind of what this kind of did for all of us.
Yeah.
And, you know, I hope for all of them and all of those that watch, they were able to look around and see some positive things and not just the negative things that we went through.
Great advice. Great advice. Well, it's always a pleasure, Wade. Thanks so much for joining us
Absolutely.
today on Speaking on
Thanks,
Demand.
Aaron.
Hey, how do they get at your at your podcast? What's the YouTube channel called?
Um, it's YouTube. It's On Tap, presented by FCSI, the Americas. They can also check out my website, www.forteamc.com. We'll take you there. Our social media channels for FCSI, the Americas, or Forte AMC are out there. contact me if they've got any questions, comments, complaints, whatever they want to do. I'm fine. I love talking to people.
So. Don't contact him with any complaints, please. All right. Well, I'll drop those links in the notes here. Wade, have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Aaron. Absolutely. Thank you.